Jewish meditation tradition, there are a number of manifestations of the eternal, and they are derived from the Bible. One of them is wisdom, and this wonderful passage from Proverbs gives us one of these pictures of what it means to have the eternal appear and operate in the world as wisdom. It is wisdom calling, understanding, raising her voice. She takes her stand at the topmost heights, by the wayside, at the crossroads, near the gates at the city entrance. At the entryways, she shouts, "O man, I call to you. My cry is to all mankind. O simple ones, learn shrewdness. O dullards, instruct your minds. Listen, for I speak noble things. Uprightness comes from my lips. My mouth utters truth. Wickedness is abhorrent to my lips. All my words are just, none of them perverse or crooked. All are straightforward to the intelligent person, and right to those who have attained knowledge. Accept my discipline rather than silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies. No goods can equal her. I, wisdom, live with prudence. I attain knowledge and foresight. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride, arrogance, the evil way, and duplicity in speech. Mine are counsel and resourcefulness. I am understanding. Courage is mine. Through me, kings reign and rulers decree just laws. Through me, princes rule, great persons and all the righteous judges. Those who love me, I love. And those who seek me will find me. Sholem Aleichem, the Yiddish storyteller, tells a story about a poor man who is starving and is abused by everyone for much of his life, and finally he just passes away, And he wakes up in the glory of heaven, and the angels are marveling at him, and they said, "Look at all you've been through, all the suffering, all this trouble, and you've had so little. What would you like? We'll give you anything," right? And he looks around, and he's been terribly hungry, and he says, "Could I just have a fresh piece of bread?" and I met with a man this past week, and I've met with him a number of times, who for 40 years here in Aspen has been a laborer, and he is actually a Vietnam vet who's disabled, and he's suffering some additional disability now. And although he gets some government assistance due to his military service, he still lives pretty much in poverty. And what's remarkable is how many people have been helping him in a daily way in this community, and that's been going on for a number of years now. When someone took money from him, another person got that money back and saw that he was better protected. I'm also amazed, having spent some time with him, how grateful he is, how generous he has been to other people with the little bit that he has. And he's always astounded at people's gifts to him. One of the restaurants here in town makes sure that when he's not going to the senior center for lunch that he gets food, I mean, it's just been a beautiful tribute, and he marvels at it. He doesn't take it for granted. There's a book called Our Towns by James and Deborah Fallows that is about similar efforts, such as the ones that this man has received here is just one example, going on especially in small cities around the United States. And in the book, they document local efforts to restore communities, to encourage visits and planned events in city centers or in town centers. What's interesting is that the successful people in these communities are expected to contribute to the common good, that they have developed a culture of that. And that some cities have boosted skills training and education on their own to help people get better jobs. And others have led successful efforts to build new enterprises, to get people successfully started in those enterprises. And that's very much what we see here at our best, isn't it, in this community. I know that there are people here, including someone who's here right now, who have helped elders with their taxes, myself included, and who have helped with computer skills through the library. I know that one of the examples in this book by the Fallows is of indoor places for families to take toddlers, young children, during the winter especially, not only so the children have some place to play with all the activities there, but also to share time with them. And when I work out down at the Carbondale Rec Center, I'm always delighted to see the very young children and their mothers, and sometimes their fathers as well, come for that exact thing, for a recreation time, especially in the winter that's indoors, so that not only the kids can play, but the people that are spending all their time often alone with their children are getting some time with each other as well. One of the things that this takes to have these communitarian efforts succeed is overcoming some of the prejudices that people have that keep them from reaching out to each other. And I'm very struck as a teacher at CMC for all these years. I've been teaching over 20 years now, some 20-something, I don't know. And you know, although we had more students in the past from Asia and from India and from a number of Muslim countries, we do have some of them still. We have a lot of Latinos, which is wonderful. And I find that a lot of my Anglo students are really learning from them about other people, other cultures, and overcoming some of their resistance, their prejudice, their misunderstanding, their ignorance about these cultures. In fact, I had a young man who was from the South, because people come from all over to come to CMC, and he had spent a year with us, and he had been in a respectful environment toward women, at least in terms of the way we talk. We always have to relearn those things, don't we, in this era? And also he had been struck by the fact that people were so open about sexual orientation. So he went back to his little community and he found he was having a real struggle, because he realized that every other word from some of his friends was either misogynist or homophobic. And having spent some time in my psychology class, he said, I guess there's a lot of insecurity about sexuality, isn't there? And, so I think people do get to overcome things, especially when they're one-on-one with each other. Otherwise, what happens is that we have these generalities about people, but we never get to meet them, right? I know that that has especially been true in some of the classes I've taught where we've had Muslim students, and we only have a few of those right now. But it's been a real opportunity for people to confront their distortions about Muslims in general and actually meet one, you know, and spend a semester in discussions. And I teach wonderful subjects, you know, like philosophy and human sexuality and death and dying and this sort of thing. And it brings out all of the various aspects, you know, of our lives. So you can't really escape, you know. It really goes to where you're living, where you are. One of the early experiences I had that really helped me to develop that possibility, and I may have mentioned this when I spoke here a long time ago, was that I was a minister I was an assistant minister in a 80% black congregation in South Philadelphia, in the late 60s, all right? We did absolutely marvelous things, you know. We got into all of these efforts, activism, marches. We were feeding people, getting them to stop eating dog food, for instance, and eat real food, you know, when they were poor, mobilizing all kinds of efforts, including a community school board and efforts to get people into their own housing. And what happened was that this was early on, really. And what was meaning in the civil rights movement, so that we had a lot of people in suburban Lutheran congregations that had never met a black person, all right? And so what we did was we set up a program called Wellsprings, where we took our black church council members up to the church councils in these suburban white congregations, and we would spend a whole weekend constantly talking, eating together, praying together, discussing things together, and it was marvelous, the one-on-one relationships that we were able to develop in a weekend, all right? And then these people would come down, shaking in their boots sometimes, to Southwark, right, to South Philadelphia, and find out that it really wasn't so awful to actually visit a place that they had mostly avoided, you know, and that there were some exciting and wonderful things happening, and a number of them got involved, all right, because they were really drawn in, you know, by what it was like to actually get to know people one-on-one, and a lot of their stereotypes got blown away, right? Because a number of the people we took were actually successful business people. They were people who had the same concerns for their children as the people in the suburbs did. It was absolutely marvelous. And I've looked for that dimension wherever I've found myself, you know, and it's been wonderful to have any amount of that, because we're not going to really overcome xenophobia or our prejudices unless we do have some kind of one-on-one encounter. I mean, that's, if anything, that's why we want to welcome the migrants, right? We want to welcome some of the stranger, as it says in both the Old and New Testaments, right? That along with the orphans and the widows, we always welcome the stranger, and those are migrants, right? They're coming from other places. Unless you actually get to encounter them, you don't get to really appreciate them. We had a man who came to our house who was very skilled as a carpenter to work with us, and we were shocked when he wouldn't let us pay him. I said, "What's this?" He said, "Well, you guys are old." I said, "What do you mean we're old? We're going to pay you, you know." I'm still working, you know. And no, he said, "No, I have this respect for older people from this country that I come from, you know, and I've got to do that, you know." And so, of course, we had to go roundabout and sneaky ways to finally get some money to him and his family, you know, at a holiday, just because it was just too much. You know, I mean, he'd put all these hours in, and I did convince him the next time he came to at least give him some money, but he wouldn't tell me how much to pay him. I mean, he still had that kind of feeling, you know. I mean, I gained from that, you know. That's beautiful to have someone's spirit be so rich and so rare in some ways, you know, in this kind of context. We have lost some of that range of experience, and I think that the critics that are telling us that we get into a kind of echo chamber of those who are familiar and agree and are having the same experiences and the same culture or whatever, prevents us to some extent from having enough of these encounters. It was very revealing for me when I arrived in South Philadelphia that I was working with gang members. You know, I kind of cringe now when I think of the things that I thought I could do safely with people who were about to fight each other. You know, we did actually get the Fifth Street Gang to be transformed into a rock group, but I can't take credit for that because we had a team come from a university there in Philadelphia and work over a period of time with the Fifth Streeters, and they got really good. I mean, they did gigs all over the city, you know, and they weren't fighting anymore with broken bottles at each other, you know. So it was pretty scary stuff at first. You know, part of this prejudice comes from what Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist and the economist now, because he got his Nobel Prize in economics for his brilliant application of information about biases and fallacies. What he did was he identified what he calls my side bias. The fact that we are reluctant to give up our pictures of other people, our stereotypes, our conclusions, our attitudes. It's really along the lines of, on any topic, my mind's made up, don't confuse me with the facts, right? That generally, officially is called confirmation bias, because we get confirmed in our notions and we don't want to modify them. We look for things that confirm what we already believe and what we already think, rather than be challenged to see something differently. And I think that's what we need most if we're going to be able to overcome some of these stereotypes and conflicts. I've been excited by the challenge. I teach environmental ethics again in August, starting in August. And this is a tough era, because we're trying to not only teach environmental ethics, but practice it, and actually do some activism that's effective. And Frederick Rich, in his book, Getting to Green, has tried to help us see that there is a way to work with people without having to use all of the phrases like climate change and all the rest that turn them off, all right? That a lot of conservatives are really into conservation, all right? That if you are a hunter, if you're a rancher, if you are an outdoors person in any way, you want the environment to remain whole and protected and thrive, and you're willing to do something about that. And if somebody at least can be sensitive enough not to raise all kinds of issues that kind of interfere with your willingness to be part of that effort, there are things we can still do together. And the same thing is true. There have been a couple of excellent efforts to help us understand, how do we talk to science deniers? Our first prompting is to get angry, right, and want to be in their face and tell them that they're wrong and that they should accept the findings of careful research. But when we do that, obviously they are entrenched. They want to confirm their opinion rather than change in any way. So the suggestion has been that when we're dealing with real situations, especially with environmental change, that we look to the opportunities for people who are involved in solar or wind power to earn money and gain skills and be part of the solution, without having to name, some term that they're really that's really a barrier for them to being able to cooperate and work with those programs. And there has been some success in doing exactly that. Skills training. We have people that are going to lose jobs. No matter what people are told about the future of coal is not lots of jobs, all right? And people who have been working in that industry are definitely needing to continue their education, to add to their skill set so that they can get well-paying jobs in other ways. These are efforts that most people will support. There are financial impacts of sea level rise. And this was a really interesting thing. I was sent by the court to do an investigation down in Georgia. Right? I had to stay with this very conservative family, and it was quite interesting to spend time with them. And when I mentioned sea level rise, oh no, we don't use that phrase here. Even though the sea level is rising in that part of Georgia and people are suffering from it, right? We don't talk about that, right? But and he was knowledgeable enough to know that there actually are efforts underway in his part of Georgia to try to ameliorate the situation, address the situation, cope with the situation, and that if you don't talk about this ideologically, there will be some cooperation in doing something, right? That's really what we're looking for. I mean, yes, we can talk about ideology. We can talk about the fact that for many fundamentalists, God alone changes the world, and so you shouldn't be messing with campaigns that are supposed to change what God is already doing or something like that. I mean, they have their own rationale, but if you don't touch that and you simply go to what's actually happening, something can be changed. Now, the beauty to me of this passage that I read, and the other passages in the 8th and 9th chapters of Proverbs, is that wisdom is part of nature. That when we encounter wisdom, we're encountering the world as it is. That there is something profound happening from the beginning of time in this passage that is manifesting over and over again and inviting us to be part of it. I love this one book, which I know is a little hard for a lot of people to read because it's by a Nobel laureate physicist, Frank Wilczek, but it's called A Beautiful Question. And over again, in an absolutely stunning way, he shows us how much the natural world that is studied by science is a place of wonder and awe, of constant revelation of things that blow our mind, that require us to lay aside some of our notions in order to receive something which we will only barely comprehend, right? But which, if you have any interest at all in the world, will intrigue you, right? And he mentions other scientists like Niels Bohr, who were very receptive to concepts like yin and yang or whatever, just as symbols of how complex and how interrelated different forces and factors are in nature. And that's what this passage is really inviting us to do. When I tell my philosophy students that Spinoza, who started out as a Jewish philosopher, and when he was rejected by his own Jewish community because they were afraid he was upsetting the Christians too much, right? He went to actually some Christians who were quite willing to deal with his unorthodox approach to things. Even changed his name from Baruch Spinoza to Benedict, all right, because that was the Latin Christian name, so he tried very hard to work with both in order to continue his investigations into nature as a manifestation of the eternal. It's like that other term in the Bible that is used in Jewish mystical practice, Shekinah, the presence of God in the world, the active, moving presence of the divine in our lives and in our world. And that's a remarkable witness. And what happens here is that we are given an invitation, I think, in this passage from Proverbs to honor the things that we do know, that come with careful and long effort at trying to understand the world around us, and that we can rely on an agreed-upon consensus of scientific research for accurate predictions and continued investigation in all fields. That without that, we're really unable to make any progress in medicine, in biology, and chemistry, and all of the areas that are responsible for what our culture can be at its best. When we sacrifice truth-telling to ideology, we're jeopardizing our own well-being and that of our descendants. We know this. But it is not easy because there will continually be something new. And we are challenged to find a way to respect what remains true while we unfold more about it. And I have to really work with some of our students. I have a lot of students, and I really respect them, who are very fundamentalist Christian, all right? They come from those backgrounds, more than you might think right now. It's rich to find ways to interact with them that don't raise the red flags and the barriers, and where they can't really take anything in, but where they can be receptive to the richness of the divine working in nature and through nature, and that what science is giving us is really a closeness to the understanding of the divine, not just to something that they fear is going to deny their faith. I'm quite delighted with some other things about this marvelous set of passages here. There is a kind of critical capacity for rationality in our species that is celebrated as part of wisdom. We're called to be the best that we can be rationally, and to let go of our arrogance and folly. To be lovers of wisdom, we have to proceed carefully not to fall into the same holes as the deceivers, right? That it's so easy for us to overstate our case, right? Or to not do the hard work that is required. I know every time I prepare anything in philosophy or any of these courses, I have to be very, very careful in how I go about it so that I'm being honest about what we don't know about. I mean, like Socrates, right? I'm wise only to the extent that I know that I don't know and what I don't know, right? And along with that, right, there is the understanding that ignorance can be a bondage, that fear and deception can keep us from being able to move forward in our lives and in our society and in our world. Jesus said that we will know the truth and the truth will make us free. And I think there's a literal truth to that. In Proverbs, wisdom says, listen, for I speak noble things. My mouth utters truth. All my words are just, none of them perverse or crooked. All are straightforward to the intelligent person and right to those who have attained knowledge. Accept my discipline rather than silver, knowledge rather than pure gold. For wisdom is better than rubies. No goods can equal her. The one who finds me finds life. Those who seek me will find me. Heed discipline and become wise. Reprove a wise man and he will love you. Instruct a wise person and that one grows wiser still. Amen.